Well, good morning, folks. Or I don't know if it's time stamped, whatever it is. I hope everybody's having a great day as you're watching this. But I'm Chad Duplantis from Dennis in the Know, and it's an honor to be here with you. We are recording an episode today because I made a friend almost a year ago now, and we've played hell trying to get together and find a time that we could record this episode. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce you to somebody who's kind of becoming a big name in dentistry, although he's not a dentist, last I checked. So let me first introduce our guest. Our guest is Bob Kulhan, and I probably didn't say that correctly, but I'm going to let him correct me when he comes on. Bob is a professor at the Duke University Fuqua School of Business and an elite improv comedian. And honestly, the improv comedian thing is like, okay, I got to get to know this guy. He's the founder and CEO of Business Improv, which is a 25-year-old consultancy linking improvisation to business through behavioral sciences. His focus is on people skills and the human connection. He works with a broad range of businesses from pharma to aerospace. Obviously, let's throw dentistry in there as well. He works with universities, organizations, government institutions, and so on and so forth. He's worked extensively with entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, as well as many small and medium-sized businesses. He is the best-selling author of Getting to Yes and the Art of Business Improv. So without further ado, let me bring Bob up here and let's have a spirited conversation. Bob, it's good to see you, buddy.
Chad, it's good to see you as well. Yeah, and you're right. It's been at least a year. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was October of last year. So I'll tell you, for those of you watching, how this all started. Bob and I were both speaking at the ADA, and I was in one room and Bob was in another room. We happened to be next to one another, and I was doing a hands-on workshop, and he said they were very loud. However, the soundproofing in the ADA was very, very good, I guess, because it didn't bother us at all. But most people that you meet at speaking conventions don't really care how loud they are. And Bob came out and apologized to me for being so loud. And I was like, hey, dude, it's all good. And then like, what are you speaking on? And he says improv. And I'm like, okay, I got to learn a little bit more about this. So how did dentistry find you, Bob?
Well, SmileCon
Okay.
reached out to me several years ago. First, because they needed a little bit of a strategy session as they were thinking about, forming SmileCon and exiting what at that time was the heavier periods of the pandemic. And so worked with them collaboratively, and that turned into opportunities to do virtual, and then that turned into opportunities to do in-person engagements. And then that has sort of guided me through all sorts of different conferences, including the last one that you and I were at, Hinman,
Yeah.
Which might lead to a joint presentation next year if you're still up to that one. But
I would love that. I would love it. So, hey, we talk about was SmileCon that wasn't your first dental conference, was it?
SmileCon was my first dental conference.
Okay.
As you said before, though, we've worked with a lot of different industries and a lot of different conferences. Yet that was my first one focused in the dental industry.
So you got to experience the scouts and how all of that works.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's led to a bunch of other opportunities. But before we go too much further, everybody knows about the ADA, but real quickly, what was your impression of the Hinman, which was the next meeting that we actually spoke at together?
Wildly different than SmileCon. And
right.
I mean this in very complimentary ways. They don't seem to really, even though they're, conferences focused on the dental industry, they don't really compete with each other. As far as I'm concerned, as an outsider, this is a pure third-person perspective here. I would say that the Hinman conference was almost white glove in nature. It was from first interactions to the end, very warm. They pride themselves on Southern hospitality, and they lived up to their names from my perspective. It was welcoming, and everyone was open, and lots of really great, honest conversations. Just good down to earth people. So I really enjoyed my time at Henman. I hope to go back.
It's funny. That was my first time at the Hinman as well. But as a dentist, I've heard about it for years, and I don't think I really understood what the Hinman was. That it was a dental study club, and then they've got this great meeting. And I would have to agree with you. I loved how you said it was white glove. I mean, from start to finish. I mean, getting off the plane and having somebody there with a sign waiting for you, and then you have your own vehicle, which is a really nice vehicle that is taking you to the conference. And then, trying to explain it to another speaker. I mean, from the moment that you exit that vehicle at the hotel, you have a host that does not leave your side
Yeah.
until you get back on that vehicle to go back to the airport. I mean, it is truly Southern hospitality. And then it's like, well, you got to have breakfast before you speak. We got to do lunch. We got to do dinner. And man, the nightlife was pretty spectacular too. I mean, it was a great event. So I know it was an honor for me to be there, and I'm sure it was for you as well.
Oh,
So.
absolutely. Great people, great event. And like I said, I hope to be invited back.
So I pulled something that I kind of want to start here. I pulled something from the Hinman because I stalked you afterwards. No, actually, I wanted to see what the topics of your lectures are. So the Thursday courses: culture. How do your patients feel when they leave your office? And then baby, let me light your fire, which I'm a Doors fan, so I get it. Behaviors that affect intrinsic motivation. And then your Friday courses: tooth extraction, hire a barber, new times call for new techniques for leading through disruption, and then people quit people, snuff out burnout through intrinsic motivation. And so when I go through these, I notice that there's a theme in at least two of them of intrinsic motivation. So would you be willing to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So for anybody, this is probably something everyone knows, yet good to at least start with the difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is the money, the bonuses, the sexy stuff, right? This is why I'm
Right.
going to go do this thing, versus intrinsic motivation, which is heart and gut and that, internal fire we have to want to do something. And so with this, we're in a number of different capacities, and we can include the culture piece, which is, how your receptionist meets and greets the FedEx worker when he, she, they are coming in. That's all part of culture. It's the desire to do something. And intrinsic motivation really comes in twofold. It's from the person who wants to light the fire. They have to be intrinsically motivated, and the fire that you want to light in other people. And then they have to at least be open to be intrinsically motivated. So what we do ultimately, whether it's the creating culture or handling conflict, handling disruption, and ultimately avoiding burnout and morale issues, is really look to put foundational blocks in place on which any dentist or dental practice or dental office can start erecting architecture for success that ultimately creates this environment in which people want to be there. They want to go the extra mile. They want to help out. And there's key tenets that you can use that get people to do that. And it's fun to watch people, even in the short periods of time that we have in these conferences, go from being skeptics of what business improvisation is to just completely on board and immersed in these techniques, because they feel it in themselves and they see it in other people as we go through experiential learning in mass. So it's never in demonstration form. It's not like, see what that person does or watch these slides. It's everybody's going through every exercise at one time. So in that capacity, we really start to move the needle on something like intrinsic motivation.
I found that really interesting when I was reading through that. And I will say that as I stepped out of my presentation, I got to kind of watch what was going on in yours and loved everything that was happening. But I think I might have jumped the gun a little bit. Let's take a step back and let's talk about your journey through life, and your formative years and whatnot, and, what piqued your interest and how that got you to where you're at right now.
Oh my goodness. How far back do you want to start?
Yeah. let's
Journey in
start.
life. Well, I was born in Valparaiso, Indiana.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Let's
Child,
start with
1970.
comedy. How did comedy enter your life?
The short answer is in high school, I followed a Billy Crystal quote really well, which is I wasn't a class clown, I was a class comedian. So it was
Okay.
really working on timing and situation, circumstance, things of that nature, people and trying to work that. And then it was time for the talent show. I didn't really have a talent. So what happened was like the pom-pom routine would come out and do the routine and the curtain would fall and there'd be several minutes of just the audience staring at a curtain while the jazz band set up or whoever else was going to come out there. And so by my sophomore year, I was like, can I take that dead time in between the real acts? And they're like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. I was just going to go out there and try to make people laugh. And this is in downstate Illinois, a town called Effingham, Illinois. And they reluctantly like, you can have a couple of spots. And so I grabbed a buddy of mine, Andy Cutright, and we jumped up on stage and came up with some loose premises and then just did whatever we could to make people laugh. And that then moved into my junior year, which they were like, that worked well. Do you want some more spots? And we're like, yeah. And by the time I was a senior, we were pretty much hosting it without being called hosts. And when I left high school in 1990, I read an article when I was at Illinois State University of local girl doing good at the Second City. And I was like, what is the Second City? And I'm like, as I'm reading, I'm like, that's what I did. That's exactly what I did. I didn't know this is a thing. People do this thing. It's called improv. And I was like, just blowing my mind as a 19-year-old. So moved up to Chicago and started studying under the person who would be my mentor, who just by coincidence created the Second City Training Center, a brilliant man named Martin DeMont. And that was 1991 and have been doing it since.
And for those of you that don't know, any budding comedian, their dream would be to A, visit Second City, and B, one day be involved with Second City to some extent. And I think it's safe to say that the vast majority of the Saturday Night Live cast from past and present had a stint at Second City.
Yeah, I think you have to expand cast to everyone from writers to directors to even producers. And the answer to that is yes. And I was very fortunate in my time in Chicago that when I left Chicago, I was on the main stage of the Second City as an understudy. So first string male bench warmer. And I toured for him. I directed for him. I did all sorts of great stuff for him. I was in the training center for a long time. It's a great institution.
And there's both improvisational comedy and stand-up through Second City, correct?
Well, Second City is a monster institution, so they do all sorts of stuff. And and stand-up is certainly part of it.
So, but improv is your thing.
Improvisation is my thing. I've done countless one-man shows. I've done stand-up sets before. When I do stand-up, though, if somebody's like, Bob, you want to do 7 minutes? Like, yeah, absolutely. My stand-up set is very much like Andy Kaufman, if that name means anything to you or anyone else. That
very much so. The man on the moon.
I will hold one character for 7 minutes, and I will just then let my improvisation training take hold and let the comedy come from just holding that character. And very often I'll get a character from the audience. And so you'll just watch this character take place and get formed in real time. And then it's off to the races. And then you get the little light in the back that says, you're at time. And like, okay. And then you find a way to put a button on it. And sometimes that button's a nice clean button that you could do like a first line of the stand up and the last line. And it feels like this really cool, organic piece. And other times it's like, hey, thanks for the time. I gotta go. There's no out. That was my out. So this is my time.
Is there, when you do improv, I mean, obviously there's training and there's preparation, but it's my understanding when you do stand up, there's a lot more preparation because you have to have your material kind of ready to go and and canned. And is that correct as well?
Yes. Classic stand-up is setup, payoff, setup, payoff. That's the joke structure. You think like Seinfeld, for example. And you practice that over and over and over again. You workshop stuff in front of the audience. You try new bits, and sometimes the joke works one night, and even in the very next set, an hour later, you do the same joke and it fails, and you have to workshop it. You have to tool it over and over again, which is then different than improv, because improvisation, especially when you go to where I come from, Chicago improv, it's really rooted in organic creation. You get one suggestion, pen, and you're off for 25, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 75 minutes, 90 minutes on stage, performing organically in real time. So everything is created in real time. You're watching heightened listening, heightened adapting, heightened initiations that you make that work and don't, and you back up out of it. So failure is ever present inside of it. And improvisation, unlike stand-up, which is a solo event, is much more of an ensemble or team-based thing. That typically there's more than one person on stage improvising. And so we're working off of each other as a team, like in a dental practice. And even when you're alone, though, like I said, my stand-up sets, which I'm improvising, I use the audience as my team. So I'll do something, and then the audience responds, and then I'll react to how they respond, and they react to how I responded to them. And then together we essentially create this. And so unbeknownst to them, they act as my ensemble, even when I'm alone on stage. And that's the same with every solo improviser.
I think in dentistry, you've got to be good at both. And I always joke because, you have to be good off the cuff. And, when somebody, you have to have witty responses, and I think it creates a lot of engagement and adds to that experience of the patient. But what I laugh at is when we're seeing 6, 7, 8, 9 patients a day, my jokes get a little bit stale because I have 6, 7, 8, 9 new audiences. Yeah. And I often notice that my assistant is just sitting there rolling her eyes like, dude, you've said that like 4 times today. I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, you know what? It gets a chuckle every time. So I'm going to say it 5, 6, 7, 8 more times and just make sure that it works, So how does, when you're dealing with, I'm trying to figure out how to ask or present this question, but when you're working with dental practices, let's start here. What do you feel is their driving factor to come to your courses? Or is there one?
It's all going to be individualized, really, because for some, they're coming in because there's conflict inside the practice itself. There's difficult people, or there's stress. They're going through disruption. They're moving change, trying to adapt new technology, whatever it might be. And they're just looking for some new techniques to deal with this change. For others, and this is a program that I ran for SmileCon, delivering redundant messages authentically and with energy. So each one sounds real. So those jokes that you just mentioned that you'll tell to each patient over 9 times, there's little tricks that you can use from improvisation, which is essentially reading the other person. Instead of getting in your head and delivering a rote message, it's, I'm going to deliver this, and I'm going to deliver this in a different way based on what you just said. And so now I'm reusing your information to tell the same joke that I just told the time before. And then the joke will change a little bit based on that.
Exactly.
So, there's all sorts of techniques like that. There's also, in that same spirit of dealing with change and disruption, I've been brought in many times for just creativity. We need to find creative solutions. We want everyone to gel. We have new staff members coming in. We've never done a team building type of thing before. Culture. I've been brought in many times because there's, different cultures for those who have multiple practices in different practices, and you want to have one unifying message, so that if one person goes to one practice and they have to go to another practice for an emergency sake, it's not going to feel like going to 2 separate practices. So there's continuity in between them, and each one that has that serving type of focus of making everyone feel welcome and valued as patients, as well as valued as practitioners and dental hygienists and staff personnel. And the list will go on, actually.
No, I mean, I get it. And you bring up something, and it's something that I experienced recently as a patient, and I wish more offices could hear this, because a lot of specialists, not necessarily general dentists do as well, but a lot of specialists have multiple locations. And as a patient, I took my daughter into a location, and was greeted just very oddly. Just it just wasn't like an atmosphere that I was like, okay, this is really weird. We went back to the office, we talked about it, and it was like, hey, this is different. And this is a medical practitioner that I'm speaking of, not a dental practitioner. Well, then she had to go back, so we take her to another practice, and completely different experience. And you get to a point where you're like, okay, if I have to go here again, I want her to go to that office and not the first office that we went to. We saw the same doctor, had the same experience with the doctor, but the staff, it was a completely different culture and two different practices. So, my thought process is that you need to take all of those team members, and you all need to go to Bob's course and all figure out how you can work on the same page, so there's not that different feeling every time you walk in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would love for you to take my course,
Yeah.
without question. So thank you for that. At the same time, though, it's something that I think a lot of uh, leaders don't consider, and that's brand continuity ultimately. So I think it's good at this point, Chad, to underscore that the way that for a quarter century have been linking improvisation to personal and professional development, leadership development, culture, is through the behavioral sciences. And it all started actually with behavioral economics. So back in 1999, and I had the opportunity to sit down and have 3 separate meals with the Nobel Prize winner, Danny Kahneman, who just passed away a few months ago. Um, it's all about how people spend, and people don't spend money rationally. We spend money irrationally. So to your point, if you went to that first practice where you didn't have a great experience with the receptionist, and that was the first time you went to that doctor, and you walked out of there, what's the probability that you'd want to go back to that dentist rather, or that doctor, because
Yeah.
you had such a rough experience with the receptionist who greeted you? It all blends into each other, right? And you're fortunate enough that you have a second practice that you've gone to before. You're like, I'll go to practice B as opposed to practice A. Some people are going to say, this is too much work for me. I don't want to choose between the two. And practice A is closer to me. So I think it's time I find a new dentist, doctor practice.
So I'm writing notes as we're speaking. So I wanted to tell you, I wrote down behavioral economics.
Hmm.
So that intrigues me. So I'm sure there's some literature on this that I can find. Do you do a lot of, or speak to personality profiling?
I've worked with a lot of different assessments and worked with people who do personality profiling. And as an improviser, you go through the trenches watching scenes, you become a coach, you become a teacher. So you watch people perform over and over again, and people watching, as the common park bench type of thing to do, hobby, I suppose, if you will, actually becomes a bit of a passion for a lot of us. Like, you can really read people very quickly and understand who they are. It does not take much to understand core behavior versus intuitive behavior. Well, I mean, those really link together, but just reactionary behavior, you can see a lot of who people are very, very quickly. So though I have no formal training, I'd be happy to go,
No,
dance with anybody who does.
this is probably why you and I get along so well, because I think what you're saying is exactly what I'm thinking. I think a lot of it is the way you were raised, kind of the things that you enjoyed doing growing up. And dude, I could people watch all day long. And I could pretty much tell you their next move. I mean, there are places in this world, the airport being probably the best, Disney World being a close second. Um, the Renaissance Festival, if you ever been to one of those are great. But you sit there and you people watch all day long, and you can almost judge their next move. And so if we talk, and this may sound kind of dumb, but if we talk personality types, A, B, C, D, I can point out a type A immediately. The rest of them, I don't necessarily get it, but I can still find ways to engage with those people by feeding off of those people and understanding their body motion, their mannerisms, the way that they speak, the way that they respond, and find a way to somewhat connect with those people. Now, there's people that you'll never really be able to connect with, but I think it's just an ability that I've been blessed with, to be able to connect with people on various levels, not necessarily people I'm going to hang out with afterwards or whatnot, but I can at least engage with them. So I really liked your answer when we talked about personality profiling. I'm not sure that I'm a huge fan of it. But I love how you talk about ways to connect with people as well.
Yeah. And I think something that I would roll the dice to say that you're a great example of what a lot of dentists do with patients, right? Or should do anyway with patients, which is read in real time. Like, what are you really stressed about this upcoming procedure, or even talking about this procedure? You have other things going on in your mind. I think another challenge, though, is similar to family. I'd go as far as saying we're good with these external people, patients, and then we get into the practice and stop paying attention to the people who we see on a day-to-day basis most regularly.
So what do you have? I know you speak on, let me read it again just to make sure. Oh, getting to yes. Do you have techniques that you work with dental teams on treatment acceptance and case presentation and whatnot?
Yes, yeah, it's Getting to Yes, and I want to be careful,
Yeah.
because Getting to Yes is a brilliant book by Bill Urey.
Okay.
It's a negotiations book.
Getting to yes, and I
Yeah,
apologize.
I don't want to steal his thunder,
Yeah.
because I'm sure he's really worried about that.
Yeah. He is. He called me before and said, "Make sure you say this correctly."
Yeah,
Dumbass.
yeah. Probably gonna be hovering her outside.
Yeah.
On another autograph.
Yeah.
He no, he did reach out to me or through somebody else when he found out the title of my book, and he's like, "Are you stealing my stuff?" I'm like, "Read my book," and it's like, "I'm improv. These are how you use these techniques. Wildly different." I hopefully tip my hat to your great title. At the same time, yes and is very different than yes, because yes is a dead end. Yes is definitive. Yes is how we're going to go, and is a continuation, and is an extension, and is movement, and is a bridge to an opposite perspective, and is the bridge to authenticity, your voice. So yes, that was actually a program I did at SmileCon, getting patients to yes and, getting patients to acceptance, using techniques like postponing judgment, being open to hear. Let's just push it off. Using also behavioral economics in something like this. Loss aversion. Losses loom larger than gains. I'm tipping my hat to Danny Kahneman here as well, in the sunk cost fallacy, where if you place what you're going to lose and frame it in a different way than what you're going to gain, because a lot of people are like, well, if you do this, you're going to get this and this and this, as opposed to, well, if you don't do this, you're going to lose your teeth.
Yeah.
Do you want to lose your teeth? Because then we don't do the procedure. Then all of a sudden people are like, ooh, well, I don't want to lose my teeth. And that's what we start focusing on. And those losses will loom larger. Quick tip for everybody there. Yes, we absolutely work on influence factors for patients to accept new procedures.
That's what a lot of dentists are struggling with. I find that case acceptance is a struggle for a lot of dentists, and there's a lot of reasons that practices struggle. Fortunately, in our practice, case acceptance is very high. Thankfully, we're blessed. But I've been doing this for a long time, and a lot of our patients are referrals by word of mouth, and so they come into our practice with almost a sense of value and trust. But I'm also assuming that one of the big things that you connect with people on is communication, and I think that's an invaluable, that's something that we all need, and it's harder for others to learn. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. What we focus on in all of our programs in business improv, it's a core thread. You'll even see this on the website: people skills and human connection. So if you back up a little bit and think about improvisation without knowing how familiar your audience is, and I know you have a greater degree of familiarity, both from personal levels on your own individual
Yeah.
side, as well as your son's endeavors.
Yeah.
Um, Improvisation is a communication and collaboration based art form. That's it. At its core, communication, collaboration. Outcome is creativity. Outcome are these great shows. Outcome is dealing with change, the unknown, all sorts of stuff. It's communication and collaboration, which means that it's all about people skills. So what we teach is how to connect with people on his, her, their level on an individual basis, and how the group can connect as well. So now going back to the behavioral science side of who I am, this all started in 1999 when I started studying how people make decisions in real time on an individual basis, how we make decisions on an individual basis inside of a group, whether the group is 2 people or 20 people, and then how the group makes decisions. Once again, 2 to 20, it doesn't matter the size of the group. And all this, the reduction is how we connect with each other, how we listen to each other, how we're open to each other, how we hear each other, how we don't try to shove our thoughts down somebody else's throat, push our agenda on other people, how we build joint problem solving solutions with each other, which means it's communication, communication, communication on a very collaborative level, that it's better if we work together, if we're all building in to a greater purpose than if I just lead the path and say, everybody follow me, because if I'm not looking around and seeing who's following me, there's a fair chance I might be leading myself.
I love that. Look around to see who's following you, because if not, there's a fair chance that you're leading yourself. That's
that was improvised right there for you. So
yeah, but that's
belongs to DINKs.
Very, very valuable lesson. One of the things that I find is, even though I stated it wrong first, this is my little tidbit for dental practices. I love this getting to yes and the reason that I love it is because I speak a lot on the patient life cycle in the practice, and so we have the capture, the communication, we have the diagnosis, we have the treatment, and then we have the recall. And so if you just get to yes, unfortunately, it stops right there. But if you get to yes, and it carries on, which the most important piece of the link that I always speak to is retention. Because if we just get to yes, we may have a 1 or 2 and done in our practice, and that patient's not a patient for life. But if we get to yes, and then we keep that cycle going within our practice, and we retain patients for years to come, and that leads to referrals and whatnot. So I love the way that you set that up. And so yes, that will be a book that I will be purchasing here, because I think that's a pretty fantastic concept. So there you go. Have you been presented with any questions or struggle points within the practice, or any specific burnout that you could speak to possibly? Briefly, of course, I don't want you to keep you all day, but I know that's an open-ended question. But have there been anything that's come up to you before, during, or after a presentation that you're like, oh man?
I think a common one that I've heard, and I'm going back actually to Hinman, and I sat after a program, after one of our sessions, for another half an hour working with 2 fine individuals who took it, because they were dealing with a no person or a no but person in the practice, that no matter what they do, everything is, either met with a flat no, the definitive no, or yeah, but. And this person's just not open to hearing what anybody else has to say. So how do you get somebody else? You might be that yes and person. How do you get somebody else who's more closed-minded, or always about the restrictions, or how to make it better on his or their terms? They have this like, oh, well, if you did this, it'd be better. So it has this arrogance, that could be a know-it-all type of person. How do you get them into a collaborative state? And it's all the same types of techniques that we're talking about here. And for, just a free first step for everybody, what I'll tell everyone consistently when you're talking about managing up or managing someone else's behavior is manage your own behavior first. Make sure that you are on point. Make sure that you're not triggered emotionally by what somebody else is saying. You have hot button issues that end up pushing you into a different space, or because they've done something, you start shutting off. Make sure that your energy, your attitude, and your framing of language specifically is yes and is on point. And then start working to create a collaborative solution to this problem. And by that, it might mean that you're working with others who are on the same level of you, of like, let's create a base here that at least we have our safe zone inside the practice. And it could be that you grab somebody and say, Bob, I need to have a difficult conversation with you. And this is difficult because it's hard for me to articulate and you might not hear it. And we have to work together. And I want to work together without friction. So let's start building this process together. And it's all the same techniques that we continue to put that you'll find in the book. And it's rooted in connection to people and those skills related to how we connect with each other.
So I think I have a new title for you for your next presentation.
All right.
Get in beyond the no but and to the yes and.
All right. I'm writing it down right now.
Because I think every dentist or every dental team member knows who the no but is in the practice. And they also know who the yes and is in the practice. So let me ask you.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. Just inspired another behavioral science part of this one. This one going over to Wharton and the School of Positive Psychology and Happiness. We focus more on the no but person typically than we do on the yes and person. And so we're like, oh, we have to change that person. We have to do this. We have to be sensitive. We have to be really sensitive around that person, as opposed to this other person who's easygoing and happy and fun to work with. And the argument could be thrown out there that if not 50-50, maybe we focus a little bit more on the people who are making the practice better and work to, through culture, start shifting behavior of other people.
I have it's funny that you say that, because I think we all experience that. I have a new office manager and she was asking how to handle a conflict in the office. And I said, all right. I said, so here's the deal. I said, get them all together and have a meeting and just let them vent. Just let them go. And I said, and listen, and take notes. Every negative turn into a positive at the end of that meeting. I said, and then just kind of gather all of the thoughts, let them vent, and then just cut them off at the end and just say, and just be thinking the whole time how you're going to turn each negative into a positive. And she's like, oh, I like this idea. And I was like, I go, if everybody's got a little bit of a gripe, maybe sometimes they just need to be heard, let them be heard. Yeah. And then just try to make it positive and say, this is what we're going to do going forward. And, sometimes there's not an immediate answer, but just take a pause and say, all right, we're going to reconvene and we're going to figure out exactly how we're going to make this positive going forward. And so that's kind of how we've handled conflict, and it seems to work pretty well in our practice, but sometimes it's good just to let them vent a little bit.
You're hitting such an important part of what people need to remember, which is it's a basic human desire to be understood.
Yes.
It's basic human desire to be understood. And so whether it's venting or taking time on a one-on-one conversation to have that difficult discussion, it's making sure that you're hearing them when they're talking to you. It's taking those notes. It's listening to understand, not listening to get your point out. And in doing so, it relieves a lot of tension. It relieves a lot of stress, that you care enough about what I have to say, especially when I'm bitching or whatever it might be, to actually put a plan in place to take some of these pain points away and level out the surface a little bit more. And in doing so, let's circle back around to intrinsic motivation. This is where some intrinsic motivation lies in wait, of just like wanting to be heard, wanting to feel connected, wanting to feel understood.
I had been known back in the day to have kind of a hot head, and I think I could have taught myself this lesson, but it kind of transcended to my kids, and I mean, sometimes they'll just fly off the handle when something happens. And I use them as an example because I think if there's anything that I've taught them, it's listen first and develop a response rather than react. And I said, so you listen to be intentional rather than reactionary. And, it's just been such a valuable lesson. And I think that's exactly what you just said, and just probably a little bit better verbiage than I had in the past. But, everything that you've said just resonates so much with me. And I look forward to collaborating down the road. Absolutely. If you want to do something together, let's do it, man. I will be your case study.
Every time we've hung out, I've really enjoyed it. And at the Hinman, when you and I were staying together, and a couple of the senior leaders of Hinman were like, both of you are rating out the charts with the program. We looked at each other like, maybe we should.
That would be a blast. Let's have another meeting and discuss that in the near future. But
yeah, I've never seen a combination of a dentist and an improviser, business improviser, coming together and forming something. So we might be doing a world's first.
Well, I love improv, as you can see, and obviously my son's very passionate about it. Both of my kids were trained in improv growing up, and they can use it on me quite often. One does it semi-professionally, and the other one just does it at home when she's talking back to me. But what I'd like to ask as we come to a close here is, A, where are you speaking next? And B, what offerings do you have that maybe a dental office that's struggling or just looking for new direction or trying to handle change? What could you offer them, and how could they find you?
Well, where I'm speaking next is in a variety of places. I'll be at the DOD next week. I'll be at the University of Miami next week as well, 2 separate gigs, and that will just continue in that way. I hope to be back with the ADA soon. I hope to be back with Hinman next year.
Yeah,
anyone out there is listening, come on.
Yeah. Hey, Hinman.
Yeah, Chad and I are going to put something together.
We're coming back.
Let's work together on this.
Yeah.
You mentioned my book, Getting to Yes and the Art of Business Improv. That is prescriptive by nature. It's a Stanford University Press book. And the reason I reference the publisher is because it's not a fluff piece. It's not an opinion piece. It's baked in the behavioral sciences. It's baked in research. It's baked in the how. This is actually how you put this in place. We have an asynchronous program as well, called Improvisational Communication, which you could find on Teachable, and we'll be glad to provide any links. And as part of the Dinky discount, we're going to offer 20% on any virtual programs, as we've been teaching virtually since 2017. So that was always part of our strategy. So way before the pandemic, if you want virtual programs, synchronous rather, live in person like this, we have that asynchronous one, which is on Teachable, Improvisational Communication, in the book. So we'll offer 20% Dinky discounts on any live.
Awesome. Well, we'll get that information from you, and we'll pass it along to our group and make sure that it's on the podcast and the YouTube as well. But, as we close, I'm just going to say thank you for being here. It's always a treat to see you, my friend, but this was just fun that we actually finally got together and record this. So miracles do happen. But beyond that, for any dental practice that's struggling, has maybe that no but person, or is trying to get to yes or is working on retaining patients in the practice, looking for a little bit better culture in the practice, turn to Bob and his team at Business Improv, and we'll have multiple resources for you to be able to do so. So thank you again, Bob, for being here. And with that, that's another episode of DINKs recorded, not live. Thanks everybody. You bet.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.